The New Mexico Territory in the autumn of 1886 was a land caught between worlds, where ancient healing traditions clashed with modern medical science, and where a smallpox epidemic threatened to destroy everything that generations of Apache and white settlers had built. Dr. William Will Carter rode his weary horse through the narrow mountain pass that led to the isolated trading post of Cedar Springs, his medical bag bouncing against his leg with each step. At 34, Will was one of the youngest doctors ever to receive formal medical training at Johns Hopkins, but his boyish face had been aged by 3 years of frontier practice that had taught him the humbling difference between textbook medicine and the brutal realities of healing in the wilderness. He had been summoned to Cedar Springs by a desperate telegram from the trading post owner, reporting an outbreak of disease that had already claimed a dozen lives and showed no signs of slowing. The symptoms described in the message, high fever, distinctive rash, rapid progression to death, matched the smallpox outbreaks that had been devastating indigenous communities throughout the Southwest. Will carried with him the latest medical supplies available in 1886, morphine for pain, quinine for fever, and most importantly, a precious vial of smallpox vaccine that represented the cutting edge of preventive medicine. He also carried the confidence of formal medical education and the determination to apply scientific methods to combat a disease that had killed millions throughout human history. What he didn't carry was any understanding of the cultural complexities that would make his mission far more challenging than simply treating sick patients. Cedar Springs was a ramshackle collection of adobe buildings and wooden shacks, clustered around a natural spring that had made it a stopping point for traders, travelers, and anyone else who needed water in the high desert country. The settlement existed in the gray area between Apache territory and white civilization, serving customers from both communities, while belonging fully to neither. When Will arrived, he found a town in the grip of panic. The main street was deserted except for a few anxious faces peering from behind curtains and shuttered windows. The trading post itself was closed, with a hand-lettered sign warning of sickness within. Will dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching rail, then walked to the trading post door and knocked. After a long moment, a voice called out from inside. "Go away! We got the pox in here!" "I'm Dr. Carter," Will called back. "I received your telegram requesting medical assistance." The door opened slowly, revealing a heavy-set man in his 50s, with the weathered face and suspicious eyes of someone who had spent decades dealing with the dangerous uncertainties of frontier life. This was clearly Sam Hobbs, the trading post owner who had sent the desperate message for help. "Thank God you came, Doc," Hobbs said, gesturing Will inside. "We lost 3 more since I sent that telegram, including my nephew Bobby, just 18 years old, strong as an ox, dead in 4 days. The interior of the trading post was dim and thick with the smell of sickness and disinfectant. Will could see several makeshift beds arranged in the main room, occupied by patients in various stages of the disease. The distinctive pustular rash that marked smallpox was visible on the faces and arms of the sufferers, and Will felt his stomach clench with the familiar mixture of professional determination and personal fear that came with treating highly contagious diseases. "How many patients do you have?" Will asked, setting down his medical bag and beginning his preliminary examination of the situation. 12 still alive, maybe 15, if you count the ones who might not make it through the night. Hobbs wiped his sweating face with a dirty cloth. "But that ain't the worst of it, Doc. The worst is that this plague came from the Apache camp up in the mountains, and now they're saying it's our fault for trading with white folks." Will looked up from examining a young woman whose fever was clearly in the dangerous range. "What do you mean, it's your fault?" "There's an Apache medicine woman up there calls herself Dancing Moon, or some such heathen name. She's been treating their sick with herbs and chants and Indian nonsense, and when people started dying anyway, she told them the disease was punishment for abandoning the old ways and dealing with white men." The implications were immediately clear to Will. If the Apache community blamed white contact for the epidemic, they would be unlikely to accept help from a white doctor, no matter how desperately they needed it. And if both communities remained isolated in their suffering, the disease would continue to spread until it had claimed far more lives than necessary. "Have you had any contact with the Apache camp since the outbreak began?" Will asked. Hobbs shook his head grimly. "They won't come near the trading post, and they're turning away any white folks who try to approach their territory. That medicine woman has them convinced that white medicine is devil's work designed to finish what the disease started." Will studied the patients around him. noting the various stages of smallpox progression and calculating how many might be saved with proper treatment and vaccination of those not yet infected. But he also found himself thinking about the Apache patients he couldn't see, people who were undoubtedly suffering and dying in their mountain camp while refusing the medical help that could save their lives. "Mr. Hobbs," he said finally, "I need you to tell me everything you know about this Apache medicine woman. Her background, her training, her influence in the community. If I'm going to help both our communities survive this epidemic, I need to understand who I'm dealing with." Hobbs settled into a chair with the weary resignation of a man who had seen too much death in too short a time. "Well, Doc, that's where things get complicated. Because Dancing Moon ain't just any medicine woman. She's the daughter of Chief Red Cloud, trained by the most powerful healers in Apache territory, and smart enough to speak better English than most white folks I know." "She speaks English? Fluent as you or me?" "Spent time at the mission school when she was young, before she decided that white education was poisoning Apache minds." Hobbs leaned forward with the intensity of someone sharing crucial information. "But here's the thing that makes her really dangerous, Doc. She ain't wrong about some things. Her herbal treatments actually work for a lot of ailments, and she's saved lives that white doctors had given up on." Will felt his assumptions about primitive medicine being challenged by information that didn't fit his medical school training. "You mean she has genuine healing skills? I mean, she's the closest thing to a real doctor that Apache people have ever had, and they trust her completely. When Dancing Moon tells them that white medicine is dangerous, they believe her because she's never steered them wrong before." As Will contemplated the challenge of treating a smallpox epidemic that was being complicated by cultural conflict and mutual suspicion, he realized that success would require more than just medical expertise. He would need to find a way to bridge the gap between scientific medicine and traditional healing, between white and Apache communities that had every reason to distrust each other. The question was whether a formally trained doctor and a traditional medicine woman could find common ground in their shared commitment to healing, or whether pride and prejudice would prevent the cooperation that might save both their communities from devastation. Will spent his first 3 days in Cedar Springs treating the white patients with a combination of supportive care and the smallpox vaccine, managing to save 8 of the 12 people who had still been alive when he arrived. His success rate was impressive by frontier standards, but he was haunted by reports that the death toll in the Apache camp continued to mount while he was forbidden from providing help. On the 4th morning, his frustration reached a breaking point when Sam Hobbs brought news that Chief Red Cloud himself was among the latest casualties of the epidemic. "Dancing Moon's father died during the night," Hobbs reported somberly. "Word is that she's blaming white medicine for weakening Apache people's natural resistance to disease. She's telling her people that anyone who accepts help from you will be cursed by the spirits of their ancestors." Will felt a surge of anger at the waste of human life that cultural stubbornness was causing. Doesn't she understand that smallpox doesn't care about race or culture? That the vaccine could save her people's lives regardless of what she thinks about white medicine? Understanding ain't the problem, Doc. Pride is the problem. Dancing Moon can't admit that white medicine might succeed where traditional healing has failed, because that would undermine everything she represents to her people. Will studied the map of the local area that Hobbs had spread on the counter, noting the location of the Apache camp and the mountain trails that led to it. "What would happen if I tried to approach the camp directly, without invitation or permission?" Hobbs looked at him with alarm. "You'd be lucky to get shot quickly instead of slowly, Doc. Apache people don't take kindly to uninvited visitors even in the best of times, and these ain't the best of times. Then I need to find a way to get invited." That afternoon, Will made a decision that went against every principle of frontier safety and professional medical practice. He loaded his horse with medical supplies, including a substantial portion of his precious vaccine, and rode alone into the mountains toward the Apache camp. He had no plan beyond the desperate hope that a medicine woman who had once attended mission school might be willing to listen to reasoned arguments about the benefits of scientific medicine. It was probably the most dangerous thing he had ever attempted, but watching people die from preventable disease while he stood by helplessly was no longer acceptable to him. The Apache camp was situated in a high valley that provided natural defense against military attack while offering access to water and game. As Will approached the perimeter, he was intercepted by 2 Apache warriors who appeared from concealment with the silent efficiency that had made their people legendary fighters. The younger warrior, a man perhaps 25 years old with the lean build and alert eyes of a professional scout, raised his rifle and spoke sharply in Apache. Will didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. "I'm Dr. William Carter," Will said carefully, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "I've come to offer medical help to your people. I know they're suffering from the same disease that's been killing people at Cedar Springs." The older warrior, a grizzled veteran with scars that spoke of many battles, studied Will with the kind of professional assessment that soldiers used on potential enemies. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "You are the white doctor who claims he can cure the spotted death. I am a doctor, and I have medicine that can prevent the disease from spreading further. I've already saved lives at the trading post." "And how many did you kill with your white man's poison?" It was a question that cut to the heart of Apache suspicions about white medicine, and Will realized that his answer could determine whether he lived or died in the next few minutes. "I killed no one," he said firmly. "The disease was killing people before I arrived, and it will continue killing people after I leave if it's not treated properly. But the medicine I carry has saved lives, and it could save more if your medicine woman would work with me instead of against me." The two warriors conferred in Apache, their voices low but their gestures indicating serious disagreement about what to do with this unexpected visitor. Finally, the older warrior turned back to Will. "Dancing Moon has said that any white man who enters our camp will be killed immediately, without discussion or ceremony." Will felt his mouth go dry, but he forced himself to maintain steady eye contact. "And what do you say?" "I say that my grandson is dying of the spotted death, and maybe white medicine can save him where Apache medicine has failed." The warrior's voice carried the weight of desperate hope, carefully controlled by a lifetime of disappointment. "I say that Dancing Moon's pride matters less than children's lives." It was exactly the opening Will had been hoping for, but he understood that accepting it would put the warrior at risk of challenging his medicine woman's authority. "What's your name?" Will asked. "I am Gray Wolf, war chief of this band since Red Cloud's death." The older man's introduction carried the formal dignity that Apache people brought to important occasions. "And if you can save my grandson's life, I will protect you from Dancing Moon's anger." As Will followed the two warriors into the Apache camp, he realized that he was entering not just a different community, but a completely different world of healing practices, cultural beliefs, and medical traditions that had evolved over centuries of isolation from white influence. The question was whether his scientific training would be enough to navigate those complexities while treating patients whose lives depended on his ability to find common ground with a medicine woman who had every reason to view him as an enemy. The Apache camp was a stark reminder of how differently the two cultures approached the challenge of surviving on the frontier. Where white settlements like Cedar Springs were permanent structures designed to impose human will on the landscape, the Apache camp was a temporary arrangement that worked with natural features rather than against them. Traditional wickiups, dome-shaped shelters made from bent poles and covered with brush and hides, were arranged in a pattern that provided both privacy for families and clear lines of sight for defense. Cooking fires sent thin streams of smoke into the mountain air, and Will could see women tending to daily tasks, while children played games that seemed designed to develop the physical and mental skills needed for survival in harsh country. But underneath the normal rhythms of camp life was an atmosphere of fear and grief that needed no translation. Too many of the wickiups stood empty, their owners claimed by the epidemic that continued to spread despite every traditional remedy that had been tried. Gray Wolf led Will directly to a shelter where the sound of labored breathing indicated serious illness within. "My grandson, Little Hawk," the war chief said simply. 12 winters old, strong like his father, but the spotted death is winning. When Will examined the boy, his heart sank at what he found. Little Hawk was in the advanced stages of smallpox, with the characteristic pustular rash covering his face and arms and a fever that spoke of systemic infection. The child was conscious but clearly suffering, his dark eyes holding the kind of pain that made Will remember why he had chosen medicine as his profession. But it was the woman attending Little Hawk who captured Will's complete attention. Dancing Moon was perhaps 30 years old, with the kind of striking beauty that would have made her remarkable in any culture but was enhanced by the intelligence and dignity that marked her as someone of exceptional ability. Her long black hair was decorated with silver ornaments, and she wore traditional Apache clothing that had been carefully made with intricate beadwork and symbols that spoke of high status. But it was her eyes that truly impressed Will, dark, intelligent, and holding depths of knowledge and responsibility that he recognized, because he had seen them in his own mirror during the worst moments of his medical career. When she saw Will enter the shelter, Dancing Moon rose to her full height and spoke in Apache with a tone that needed no translation. Gray Wolf responded in the same language, and Will could hear the argument that was taking place about his presence. Finally, Dancing Moon turned to face Will directly, and when she spoke, her English was indeed as fluent as Hobbes had indicated. You are the white doctor who thinks his poison can cure what Apache medicine cannot. It was a challenge delivered with quiet intensity, and Will understood that his response would determine not just his own safety but potentially the lives of everyone in the camp. I am a doctor who thinks that Apache medicine and white medicine might accomplish together what neither can accomplish alone, he replied carefully. Dancing Moon studied his face with the same professional assessment he had used on countless patients, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. And what makes you think that Apache medicine has anything to learn from white medicine? Because Apache medicine has kept this boy alive longer than white medicine probably could have. But white medicine has a vaccine that could prevent other children from getting sick at all. It was a diplomatic answer that acknowledged her skills while asserting the value of his own. And Will could see her weighing his words with the careful attention of someone who understood that lives hung in the balance. Show me, she said finally. What followed was the most unusual medical consultation of Will's career. Working side by side with Dancing Moon, he examined Little Hawk, while she explained the traditional treatments she had been using: herbal poultices to draw out infection, teas to reduce fever, and spiritual ceremonies designed to strengthen the boy's connection to healing powers. To Will's surprise, many of her treatments showed genuine medical sophistication. The herbs she was using had properties that modern medicine was only beginning to understand, and her diagnostic techniques revealed an intimate knowledge of human anatomy and physiology that had been developed through generations of careful observation. Your fever treatment is actually reducing his temperature more effectively than anything I could provide, Will admitted after examining the boy thoroughly. And the poultices you're using are preventing secondary bacterial infections that often kill smallpox patients. Dancing Moon's expression showed surprise that a white doctor would acknowledge the effectiveness of traditional treatments. And what would your medicine add to what I am already doing? Will opened his medical bag and carefully removed the vial of smallpox vaccine, handling it with the reverence due to something that could save dozens of lives. This could prevent other people in your camp from getting sick. It's made from a related but less dangerous disease that builds protection against smallpox. Dancing Moon studied the vaccine with professional interest, asking detailed questions about its preparation, its effectiveness, and its potential side effects. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of medical principles that challenged every assumption Will had made about traditional healing practices. You want to give healthy people a disease in order to prevent them from getting a worse disease? She asked. A much milder version of the disease. Yes. It's been proven effective in white communities throughout the East. Dancing Moon was quiet for a long time, clearly struggling between her traditional training and the evidence of her own eyes about the limitations of existing treatments. Finally, she looked directly at Will with an expression that mixed hope with deep skepticism. If I allow you to use this white medicine on my people, and it fails, I will lose all credibility as a healer. My people will have no one to turn to when the next crisis comes. And if you refuse to allow me to help, and more people die who could have been saved, you'll lose credibility anyway, Will pointed out gently. Sometimes leadership means taking calculated risks for the benefit of the people you serve. It was a challenging statement that could have provoked anger, but instead it seemed to resonate with Dancing Moon's own understanding of the burdens of leadership. What do you propose? She asked. The collaboration that developed between Will and Dancing Moon over the following days was unprecedented in the history of frontier medicine. Working together in the Apache camp, they created a treatment protocol that combined the best elements of both medical traditions while compensating for the weaknesses of each approach. Dancing Moon's herbal treatments proved remarkably effective at managing symptoms and supporting patients' natural healing processes, while Will's vaccine began to show dramatic results in preventing new cases of the disease. Most importantly, their partnership demonstrated to both communities that cooperation between different medical traditions could produce better outcomes than either approach alone. Your willow bark tea is more effective for fever reduction than anything in my medical bag, Will admitted as they worked together to treat a young mother who had contracted smallpox while caring for her infected children. And your vaccine has prevented 6 new cases just in the past 2 days, Dancing Moon replied, carefully applying a poultice that would prevent the scarring that often marked smallpox survivors. Perhaps there is wisdom in combining old knowledge with new discoveries. Their professional partnership was complicated by the growing personal attraction that neither could deny but both understood was dangerous. Will found himself fascinated by Dancing Moon's intelligence, her healing skills, and her deep connection to the natural world that provided her medicines. Dancing Moon was intrigued by Will's formal medical training, his scientific approach to healing, and his willingness to acknowledge the value of traditional knowledge. But both also understood that romantic involvement between a white doctor and Apache medicine woman would create political and cultural complications that could destroy their professional effectiveness and potentially endanger both their lives. The tension came to a head when Grey Wolf approached Will privately about a matter that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the complex realities of frontier politics. "Dr. Carter," the war chief said as they sat together beside the evening fire, "I must speak with you about something that concerns the future of my people and yours." Will looked up from the medical notes he had been reviewing, sensing the seriousness in Grey Wolf's voice. "What kind of concerns?" "There are those in both our communities who view your partnership with Dancing Moon as dangerous. White men who think you are being corrupted by savage influences. Apache people who think she is being seduced by white lies." The words hit Will with the force of inevitability. He had known that their collaboration would eventually attract criticism, but he had hoped to establish such clear medical success that opposition would be overwhelmed by results. "Are you asking me to end the partnership?" Will asked. "I am asking you to consider what will happen to both of you when this epidemic ends and people have time to think about other things besides survival." Grey Wolf's weathered face showed the concern of someone who understood political realities from decades of experience. "Dancing Moon is the daughter of a chief and the most respected healer in Apache territory. You are a white doctor with connections to territorial government and military authorities. Your association creates opportunities for both communities, but it also creates dangers." "What kind of dangers?" Grey Wolf was quiet for a moment, studying the flames that danced in the fire pit between them. "There are Apache men who think Dancing Moon should marry within the tribe to preserve traditional bloodlines and cultural purity. There are white men who think you should restrict your practice to your own people and not complicate territorial politics by becoming too involved with Indian affairs." Will understood the implications immediately. If he and Dancing Moon continued their partnership, they would both face pressure from their respective communities to end what had become an effective and potentially groundbreaking collaboration. "And what do you think?" Will asked. "I think that my grandson is alive because you and Dancing Moon worked together to save him," Grey Wolf replied with simple honesty. "I think that 6 families in this camp still have their children because your vaccine prevented the disease from spreading further. I think that results matter more than the opinions of people who care more about racial purity than saving lives." It was a powerful endorsement, but Grey Wolf wasn't finished. "But I also think that if you and Dancing Moon are going to continue working together, you need to find ways to do it that serve both your communities, without threatening the political stability that keeps us all from going to war with each other." That night, Will found himself walking the perimeter of the Apache camp, thinking about Grey Wolf's warnings and trying to figure out how to preserve a professional partnership that was producing remarkable medical results, while avoiding the political complications that could destroy everything they had built. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice Dancing Moon approaching until she spoke from just a few feet away. "You are troubled by Grey Wolf's words," she observed, moving to stand beside him at the edge of the firelight. "Aren't you?" Dancing Moon was quiet for a moment, looking out at the star-filled sky that stretched endlessly above the mountain valley. "I have been trained since childhood to put my people's needs before my own desires. If our partnership endangers Apache people or creates problems that outweigh its benefits, then it must end regardless of my personal feelings. And if it continues to save lives and improve relations between our communities, then it must continue regardless of the opposition it creates or the personal costs it requires," she replied, with the quiet determination that Will had learned to associate with her most important decisions. They stood together in comfortable silence, both understanding that they were at a crossroads that would determine not just their own futures but potentially the future of medical care and intercultural cooperation throughout the Southwest. The question was whether they could find a way to preserve their partnership while navigating the treacherous political waters that surrounded any relationship between white and Apache people in 1886. The solution to their dilemma came from an unexpected source: a delegation of territorial officials who arrived at Cedar Springs just as the smallpox epidemic was finally coming under control. Led by Territorial Health Commissioner Dr. Margaret Standish, the group had been sent to investigate reports of an unusual collaboration between white and Apache medical practitioners. Dr. Standish was a remarkable woman in her own right, one of the first female physicians to receive formal medical training, and the only woman ever appointed to a territorial health position. Her reputation for competence and fairness had preceded her, but Will was still surprised when she requested a private meeting to discuss his work with Dancing Moon. "Dr. Carter," she began as they sat in the relative privacy of Sam Hobbs's trading post office. "I've received some very interesting reports about your treatment methods during this epidemic. Specifically, about your collaboration with an Apache medicine woman." Will felt his stomach tighten with the familiar anxiety that came whenever political authorities took interest in his activities. "I've worked with traditional healers when their methods proved effective. Yes, the combination of approaches has saved lives. I'm not here to criticize your methods," Dr. Standish said with a slight smile. "I'm here because the territorial government is interested in expanding them." The statement was so unexpected that Will was momentarily speechless. "Expanding them?" Dr. Standish opened a leather portfolio and pulled out several official-looking documents. "The governor has authorized me to establish a pilot program for integrated medical services in frontier communities. The idea is to combine formal medical training with traditional healing knowledge to provide better health care in areas where doctors are scarce and cultural tensions complicate treatment." Will studied the documents she handed him, gradually understanding that she was offering him something unprecedented: official territorial support for the kind of intercultural medical partnership that he and Dancing Moon had developed through necessity. "You want to formalize the collaboration?" he asked. "I want to expand it, fund it, and use it as a model for similar programs throughout the Southwest." "Doctor." Standish leaned forward with the intensity of someone who had found a solution to problems she had been working on for years. "Your success here has demonstrated that traditional and modern medicine can complement each other effectively when practitioners are willing to learn from each other." "What would that look like practically?" "A joint clinic serving both white and Apache communities, with you and Dancing Moon as co-directors. Funding from territorial health funds, supplies from military medical stores, and official recognition as a legitimate medical facility." "Doctor." Standish's eyes held the excitement of someone who was proposing something revolutionary. It would be the first integrated medical clinic in territorial history. The offer was everything Will could have hoped for: official recognition, adequate funding, and the chance to continue working with Dancing Moon without the political pressures that had been threatening their partnership. But it was also potentially dangerous for Dancing Moon, who would be taking enormous risks by accepting such a visible role in territorial government. "I need to discuss this with Dancing Moon before I can give you an answer," Will said carefully. "Of course. But Dr. Carter, I want you to understand that this opportunity may not come again. The political climate that makes this possible now could change quickly if territorial elections bring different officials to power." That evening, Will rode up to the Apache camp to discuss Dr. Standish's proposal with Dancing Moon. He found her treating the last of the smallpox patients, an elderly man who was finally showing signs of recovery after 2 weeks of careful nursing. When Will explained the territorial government's offer, Dancing Moon listened with the careful attention she gave to all important matters, asking detailed questions about funding, authority, and the political implications of accepting official recognition from white authorities. "This would make me an employee of the territorial government," she observed. "Some Apache people will see that as betrayal, as accepting the authority of people who have broken every treaty they ever made with Indian peoples. And some white people will see it as giving too much power to Indian practitioners," Will acknowledged. "But it would also give us resources to help people that we could never access any other way." Dancing Moon was quiet for a long time, weighing the opportunities against the risks with the careful judgment that had made her an effective leader of her people. "There is another consideration," she said finally. "If we accept this offer and succeed in building an effective integrated clinic, we will be creating something that has never existed before, something that could change how white and Apache people relate to each other throughout this territory. And if we fail? If we fail, we will have proven to skeptics in both communities that cooperation between our peoples is impossible," she replied with brutal honesty. "The consequences of failure would extend far beyond our own careers or reputations." Will understood that she was right. Accepting Dr. Standish's offer would mean taking responsibility not just for medical outcomes, but for the broader question of whether intercultural cooperation could work on the American frontier. "What does your heart tell you?" he asked. Dancing Moon looked at him with an expression that held both affection and resolve. "My heart tells me that we have already proven such cooperation is possible. My head tells me that we have a responsibility to build on that success in ways that serve both our peoples." She paused, then added with a smile that transformed her serious face, and both my heart and my head tell me that I would like to continue working with a white doctor who is wise enough to learn from Apache medicine. 2 days later, Will and Dancing Moon stood together in the trading post at Cedar Springs, signing the documents that would establish the first integrated medical clinic in the history of the American Southwest. Dr. Standish served as witness, while Sam Hobbs and Gray Wolf represented the communities that would be served by their unprecedented partnership. You realize, Dr. Standish said as they completed the paperwork, that you're both taking enormous personal and professional risks with this venture. Will and Dancing Moon exchanged glances that held the understanding of people who had already faced life and death challenges together and emerged stronger for the experience. Sometimes, Dancing Moon said with quiet conviction, the greatest risk is in not taking risks that could help people who need healing. And sometimes, Will added, the most important medical breakthroughs come from combining different approaches in ways that no one has tried before. As they shook hands to seal their partnership, all 4 people in the room understood that they were witnessing the beginning of something that could change the future of frontier medicine and intercultural relations throughout the American West. The question now was whether their vision could survive the challenges that would inevitably come from people who preferred the familiar divisions of the past to the uncertain possibilities of an integrated future. The integrated clinic that Will and Dancing Moon established over the following months became a marvel of frontier innovation, combining the best aspects of both medical traditions in a facility that served patients, regardless of their race, culture, or ability to pay. Located on neutral ground between Cedar Springs and the Apache camp, the clinic was built with funding from territorial health funds and volunteer labor from both communities. The building itself reflected their collaborative approach: adobe construction techniques from Mexican traditions, ventilation systems based on Apache knowledge of desert climate control, and interior layouts designed according to Will's understanding of sterile medical practices. Traditional healing herbs grew in carefully tended gardens alongside the building, while modern medical equipment occupied specially designed treatment rooms. But it was the daily operation of the clinic that truly demonstrated the revolutionary nature of their partnership. Patients from both communities quickly learned that they would receive the most effective treatment available, regardless of whether their condition required traditional remedies, modern medicine, or innovative combinations of both approaches. Mrs. Patterson's arthritis responds better to Dancing Moon's willow bark preparations than to anything in my medical bag, Will reported during one of their weekly planning meetings. But her recurring infections require antibiotic treatments that only modern medicine can provide, and little Johnny Martinez's breathing problems improved dramatically when we combined your inhaled medications with the steam treatments my grandmother taught me, Dancing Moon added. Neither approach alone would have been sufficient. Their success attracted attention from across the territory, with patients traveling hundreds of miles to receive treatment at the only medical facility where traditional and modern approaches were integrated rather than competing. More importantly, their partnership was proving that cooperation between white and Native American professionals could produce results that served everyone's interests. But their personal relationship remained carefully professional, despite the obvious attraction and deep respect that had developed between them. Both understood that romantic involvement would complicate their professional effectiveness and potentially provide ammunition for critics who were already suspicious of their partnership. The test of their resolve came during the clinic's first winter, when a severe influenza outbreak struck the region with devastating force. Working 18-hour days to treat patients from across the territory, Will and Dancing Moon found themselves relying on each other not just professionally but emotionally, sharing the burdens and satisfactions of healing in ways that deepened their connection beyond anything either had experienced. I don't know how single practitioners survive the isolation, Will admitted one evening as they finished treating the last patient of a particularly difficult day. Having someone who understands the weight of responsibility makes everything more manageable. Dancing Moon looked up from the herbal preparations she was organizing for the next day's treatments. In Apache tradition, healers are always part of a community. The idea of practicing medicine alone is foreign to us. Maybe that's something else modern medicine could learn from traditional approaches, Will suggested, as they worked side by side through the long winter nights, caring for patients who might have died without their combined efforts. Both began to understand that their partnership had evolved beyond professional collaboration into something deeper and more meaningful, a true meeting of minds, hearts, and purposes that transcended the cultural boundaries that were supposed to separate them. The recognition of their feelings came gradually, emerging through shared glances during difficult procedures, conversations that extended far beyond medical topics, and moments of comfortable silence that spoke of deep understanding and mutual trust. But it was a crisis involving Dancing Moon's own health that finally forced both of them to confront the reality of their relationship. She had been feeling unwell for several days, dismissing her symptoms as exhaustion from their heavy workload, when she collapsed during a routine patient examination. Will's medical training immediately identified the signs of severe pneumonia, complicated by exhaustion and malnutrition from months of putting their patient's needs before her own. For 3 days, Will maintained a constant vigil at Dancing Moon's bedside, using every resource of modern medicine while Grey Wolf and other Apache elders performed traditional healing ceremonies. The combination of scientific treatment and spiritual support gradually brought her fever down and strengthened her breathing. But the crisis had forced Will to confront the possibility of losing not just his professional partner but the woman he had come to love. When Dancing Moon finally regained consciousness, she found Will slumped in a chair beside her bed, his face showing the strain of days without proper rest or food. "How long?" she asked weakly. 3 days. You nearly died." Will's voice carried the raw emotion of someone who had been forced to face his deepest fears. Dancing Moon studied his face with the careful attention of someone who had learned to read people's true feelings beneath their spoken words. "You were afraid, terrified," Will admitted, "not just of losing my professional partner, but of losing the woman I love." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Dancing Moon reached out and took his hand with the gentle strength of someone who had made a decision about the direction of her life. "I love you too," she said simply. "And I think we need to decide whether we're going to let fear of other people's opinions prevent us from building something beautiful together, or whether we're going to have the courage to follow our hearts regardless of the consequences." The decision to marry created exactly the kind of political storm that both Will and Dancing Moon had expected, but it also revealed unexpected sources of support from people who valued their medical partnership over racial prejudices. The wedding itself became a symbol of the broader changes taking place on the American frontier, where traditional boundaries were being challenged by practical necessities and human connections. Dr. Margaret Standish traveled from the territorial capital to serve as Will's witness, bringing with her official recognition of their marriage from territorial authorities, who understood the political value of supporting successful integration programs. Grey Wolf performed traditional Apache marriage ceremonies, while a Methodist minister from Albuquerque conducted the legal service that would make their union recognized under territorial law. "This marriage represents more than just personal happiness," Dr. Standish observed during the reception that followed the ceremony. "It demonstrates that cooperation between different cultures can create partnerships that benefit entire communities." The celebration was held at the clinic itself, with patients, colleagues, and community members from both Apache and white settlements joining together in a gathering that would have been impossible just 2 years earlier. Sam Hobbs provided food and supplies, while Apache women contributed traditional dishes and ceremonial elements that honored both cultures' wedding traditions. But it was the speech given by Grey Wolf that truly captured the significance of the occasion. "When the spotted death came to our people," the war chief said, speaking in English so that everyone present could understand, "we faced it with traditional medicine and traditional pride, and our people continued to die. When the white doctor came to our camp, we faced him with traditional suspicion and traditional hatred, and our people continued to suffer." He paused, looking at Will and Dancing Moon standing together at the center of the gathering. But when these two healers chose to work together instead of apart, when they chose to combine their knowledge instead of defending their pride, our people began to live. Their marriage today is a celebration not just of their love for each other, but of their love for all the people they serve. The first year of their marriage tested every aspect of their relationship as they navigated the complexities of being an intercultural couple in a society that was still largely segregated along racial lines. They faced hostility from Apache people who viewed Dancing Moon's marriage to a white man as cultural betrayal, and suspicion from white settlers who questioned Will's loyalty to his own race. But they also received support from unexpected sources, patients whose lives had been saved by their integrated approach to medicine, territorial officials who recognized the political value of successful integration programs, and other mixed couples who looked to them as pioneers in the difficult work of building bridges between cultures. Their professional partnership continued to flourish, with the clinic expanding to serve patients from across the Southwest and training other medical practitioners in integrated treatment approaches. Dancing Moon began teaching courses in traditional Apache medicine, at the Territorial Medical School, while Will published papers on frontier medicine that incorporated traditional healing knowledge. Most significantly, they began to attract other professionals who were interested in similar intercultural work. A Chinese herbalist named Dr. Li Wei joined their practice, bringing knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine that complemented both Apache and European approaches. A Mexican curandera named Maria Santos established a partnership clinic in the border regions, using their model to serve mixed communities there. "We're creating something that extends far beyond our own clinic," Dancing Moon observed during one of their evening planning sessions. "A network of integrated medical practice that could change how healing is approached throughout the American West." The full impact of their work became clear during a cholera outbreak that struck the territory in the summer of 1888. Working together with their expanded team of integrated practitioners, they were able to contain the epidemic using a combination of modern sanitation practices, traditional herbal treatments, and community education approaches that drew from multiple cultural traditions. "Your integrated clinic saved more lives during this outbreak than conventional medical facilities," reported Dr. Standish when she visited to assess their emergency response. "The territorial government is so impressed that they're planning to fund similar programs in 5 other frontier communities, but their greatest personal joy came with the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Hope, symbolizing their belief in a future where cultural differences would be sources of strength rather than division. Hope was born into a world where Apache lullabies and medical textbooks were equally present, where traditional ceremonies and modern medicine were seamlessly integrated, where her mixed heritage was celebrated rather than hidden. She will grow up understanding that she belongs to all the worlds her parents represent," Dancing Moon said as she nursed their daughter while Will updated medical records nearby. Apache wisdom, white education, the healing traditions of both peoples, and the innovations that come from combining them. As their clinic continued to expand and their reputation spread throughout the Southwest, Will and Dancing Moon began to understand that they had accomplished something unprecedented in American history. They had proven that intercultural marriage could be not just successful but revolutionary, creating opportunities and innovations that neither culture could achieve alone. 10 years ago, a white doctor and Apache medicine woman working together would have been impossible, Will reflected as they watched Hope take her first steps in the clinic garden. "Now we're training other intercultural teams to do similar work across the territory." "And 10 years from now?" Dancing Moon asked. 10 years from now, I think integrated medicine will be so normal that people will wonder why anyone ever thought it was controversial," Will replied with the confidence of someone who had seen impossible dreams become practical realities. By 1892, the integrated medical model that Will and Dancing Moon had pioneered was being replicated across the American West, with their clinic serving as a training center for other intercultural medical teams. The success of their approach had attracted attention from medical schools, government agencies, and even international observers who were interested in innovative approaches to frontier healthcare. Their own family had expanded to include 3 children. Hope, now 4 years old and fluent in Apache, English, and Spanish. Thomas, named for Will's father, and showing early interest in both traditional herbs and modern instruments. And baby Sarah, whose mixed heritage was seen not as unusual but as representative of the changing demographics of the American Southwest. But it was their role as pioneers in intercultural cooperation that brought them their greatest recognition and their most significant challenges. "Dr. Carter, Mrs. Carter," announced the formal messenger who arrived at their clinic one autumn morning. "You are cordially invited to address the International Congress of Medicine in Chicago regarding your integrated approach to frontier healthcare." The invitation represented the kind of professional recognition that Will had dreamed of during his medical school days, but it also meant leaving their clinic and their community to travel into a world where their interracial marriage and unconventional medical practices might face serious challenges. "Chicago is not the frontier," Dancing Moon observed as they discussed the invitation. "There will be people there who view our marriage as scandalous and our medical practices as primitive, regardless of our results. But there will also be people who are genuinely interested in learning from our experience," Will replied. "Medical professionals who could take these approaches back to their own communities and adapt them to local conditions." After much discussion with their staff and community leaders, they decided to accept the invitation, understanding that it represented an opportunity to influence medical practice on a national level. The journey to Chicago was an adventure in itself, taking them through communities where mixed-race families were rare and often unwelcome. but it also exposed them to the growing diversity of American cities, where immigrants from around the world were creating new forms of cultural synthesis that paralleled their own work. The Congress of Medicine was held in a grand hotel that represented the height of 1,892nd luxury and sophistication. As Will and Dancing Moon entered the main auditorium where they would present their research, they were struck by the sea of white male faces that turned to stare at them with curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, obvious disapproval. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the conference moderator, "we are honored to present Dr. William Carter and Mrs. Dancing Moon Carter, directors of the first integrated medical clinic in the American Southwest." Their presentation was carefully structured to emphasize medical results rather than political philosophy, focusing on patient outcomes, cost-effectiveness, and innovations that had emerged from combining different healing traditions. Will handled the technical medical data while Dancing Moon explained traditional diagnostic techniques and herbal preparations that had proven effective in treating frontier conditions. The audience reaction was mixed but generally respectful, with several prominent physicians asking detailed questions about their methods and requesting information about establishing similar programs in other regions. But it was during the question and answer period that they encountered the kind of professional prejudice they had expected. "Dr. Carter," asked a distinguished physician from Boston, "how can you be certain that your unconventional, the partner's treatments are actually contributing to positive outcomes rather than simply not interfering with proper medical care?" The question was insulting in its assumptions about Dancing Moon's competence, but Will had prepared for exactly this kind of challenge. "Dr. Whitman," he replied formally, "Mrs. Carter's diagnostic accuracy rate is higher than mine. Her herbal treatments have fewer side effects than many pharmaceutical preparations, and her patient satisfaction scores exceed those of any medical facility in our territory. If you're asking whether Apache medicine contributes to our success, the answer is absolutely yes." Dancing Moon stepped forward to address the question directly, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had impressed Will from their first meeting. "Dr. Whitman, I have studied both traditional Apache healing and modern medical texts. I can perform surgical procedures, diagnose complex conditions, and prepare medications that meet the highest standards of purity and effectiveness." Her dark eyes met his steadily. "If you're concerned about my qualifications, I invite you to test my knowledge against that of any physician in this room." The challenge was delivered with such confident dignity that the auditorium fell silent, and Will could see several physicians nodding with evident respect for Dancing Moon's professional competence. The breakthrough came when Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to receive a medical degree in the United States, approached them after their presentation. "Mrs. Carter," Dr. Blackwell said, "your integration of traditional and modern approaches represents exactly the kind of innovation that American medicine needs to serve our diverse population effectively. I would like to invite you to present your work at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania." It was an invitation that would establish Dancing Moon as a recognized authority in her own right, independent of her husband's credentials or reputation. "I would be honored," Dancing Moon replied, "and I would like to propose establishing an exchange program that brings traditional healers from different cultures to study at medical schools, while sending medical students to learn from indigenous practitioners." The idea was revolutionary: formal academic recognition of traditional healing knowledge and structured programs for intercultural medical education. But coming from someone who had proven the effectiveness of such approaches through years of practical application, it carried weight that purely theoretical proposals would have lacked. The success of their Chicago presentation opened doors that transformed their work from a local experiment into a national model for intercultural medical practice. Dancing Moon's invitation to teach at the Women's Medical College led to similar opportunities at other institutions, while Will was offered positions with federal health agencies that would have allowed them to influence policy on a national level. But after much discussion, they decided to return to their clinic in New Mexico, understanding that their most important work was in continuing to serve the communities that had supported their pioneering efforts. "We could have comfortable academic positions and national recognition," Will observed as they discussed their options, "but our real contribution is in proving that integrated medicine works in practice, not just in theory. And our children need to grow up understanding their roots in both cultures," Dancing Moon added. "That's harder to maintain in eastern cities where Apache people are curiosities rather than neighbors." Their return to New Mexico was celebrated by both communities, who had followed their Chicago success with pride and were eager to have their medical team back in full operation. The clinic had continued to function under the direction of Dr. Li Wei and other staff members, but patients had waited for complex cases until Will and Dancing Moon could return. But their time in the East had also exposed them to new ideas and opportunities that could enhance their work. They returned with funding from federal health programs, connections to medical schools that wanted to establish training partnerships, and invitations to expand their integrated approach to other frontier regions. The government wants us to establish 3 more integrated clinics. Arizona, Will reported during a community meeting held to discuss their expansion plans. 1 in Colorado, 1 in Arizona, and 1 in California. They're offering full funding and official recognition as federal health facilities. The proposal generated intense discussion among both Apache and white community members, who understood that expansion would bring opportunities but also challenges to the carefully balanced relationships they had built over the years. Gray Wolf, now in his 70s but still serving as the unofficial representative of Apache interests, spoke with the wisdom of someone who had seen many changes during his lifetime. When Dancing Moon and Dr. Carter first began working together, many of us feared they were abandoning Apache ways for white medicine, he said. Now we understand that they were creating something new that honors both traditions while serving our people's needs better than either tradition alone. He paused, looking around the room at faces that represented both communities. If they can create similar partnerships in other places, helping other Apache people while teaching white doctors to respect traditional knowledge, then we should support their expansion, even if it means less of their time for our own community. The decision to expand was made collectively, with both communities agreeing to support the establishment of additional integrated clinics while maintaining their original facility as a training center and model for other programs. Over the following year, Will and Dancing Moon divided their time between establishing new clinics and training other intercultural medical teams. Each new facility required careful adaptation to local conditions and communities, but the basic principles they had developed proved remarkably transferable. The Colorado clinic served mining communities where Chinese, Mexican, and European immigrants worked alongside Apache people in conditions that required medical approaches adapted to multiple cultural backgrounds. The Arizona facility focused on desert medicine, combining Apache knowledge of desert survival with modern techniques for treating heat-related illnesses and toxic exposures from mining operations. But it was the California clinic that represented their most ambitious project, a full medical school that would train doctors in integrated approaches from the beginning of their education, rather than requiring them to learn intercultural methods after completing conventional training. We're not just treating patients anymore, Dancing Moon observed as they reviewed plans for the new medical school. We're training a generation of physicians who will think of cultural integration as normal medical practice. The California Medical School opened in 1895 with an initial class of 20 students representing diverse backgrounds: white Americans, Mexican Americans, Chinese immigrants, and Native Americans from several tribes. The curriculum included conventional medical training alongside courses in traditional healing practices from multiple cultures. Our graduates will understand that effective medicine requires cultural competence as well as technical skill, Will explained to visiting dignitaries at the school's dedication ceremony. They'll be prepared to serve the diverse communities that characterize the American West. Dancing Moon added her own perspective during the ceremony. They'll also understand that healing is not just about treating disease, but about building relationships between different peoples that support everyone's health and well-being. By the late 1892, the integrated medical model that Will and Dancing Moon had pioneered was being adopted by medical schools across the country. Their original clinic in New Mexico had become a pilgrimage site for medical students and practitioners who wanted to observe intercultural medicine in action. But their greatest satisfaction came from seeing their own children growing up in a world where cultural diversity was viewed as an asset rather than a problem. Hope, now approaching her teens, was already showing aptitude for both traditional healing and modern medicine. Thomas was developing interests that spanned Apache storytelling traditions and scientific research methods. Baby Sarah was learning to walk in a garden where medicinal herbs from around the world grew alongside New Mexican wildflowers. The dawn of the 20th century found Will and Dancing Moon at the height of their influence and recognition, but also approaching a new phase of their life together as they began to think about legacy and succession. Their integrated medical approach had become sufficiently established that it no longer required their constant personal oversight, giving them time to focus on training the next generation of intercultural practitioners. We've proven that intercultural cooperation can work, Will reflected as they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the gardens that surrounded their clinic. The question now is whether we've established it strongly enough to survive and grow without our direct involvement. Dancing Moon, now in her 40s but retaining the grace and intelligence that had first attracted Will's attention, considered the programs they had built over nearly 15 years of partnership. The medical schools are graduating integrated practitioners who are establishing similar clinics throughout the West. The government has made intercultural medicine an official policy for serving diverse frontier communities. Most importantly, we have raised a generation of children who see cultural cooperation as normal rather than exceptional. Their 3 children had indeed grown up to embody the intercultural future that their parents had envisioned. Hope, now 17, was preparing to attend the medical school her parents had established in California, planning to specialize in pediatric medicine that combined Apache and modern approaches to child health. Thomas, 15, was showing remarkable aptitude for botanical research, working to identify and document the medicinal properties of traditional plants using modern scientific methods. Sarah, now 8, was already trilingual and served as an informal translator for patients who came to the clinic from various cultural backgrounds. But it was an unexpected visitor who forced Will and Dancing Moon to confront the full impact of their pioneering work. Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, the legendary leader who had led his people on their famous fighting retreat toward Canada before finally surrendering to federal forces, arrived at their clinic in the spring of 1900. He was an elderly man now, his famous struggle more than 20 years in the past, but his presence carried the weight of decades of resistance to white encroachment on Native American lands and rights. I have come to see for myself this place where Apache and white people work together as equals, Chief Joseph announced through a translator, though his own English was quite good. My people have heard stories, but stories can be distorted by those who tell them. What followed was a week-long visit during which Chief Joseph observed every aspect of the clinic's operation, speaking with patients from both communities, examining the educational programs, and engaging in lengthy discussions with Will and Dancing Moon about the philosophical foundations of their approach. You have accomplished something that many thought impossible, Chief Joseph told them during a formal dinner held in his honor. You have created a place where Native American knowledge is respected and valued by white institutions, where traditional healing is combined with modern medicine in ways that benefit everyone. He paused, his weathered face reflecting the hard-won wisdom of someone who had spent a lifetime fighting for his people's survival. But you have also created something more important. You have proven that cooperation between our peoples can produce better results than conflict or separation. The validation from such a respected Native American leader carried enormous significance, both for their local communities and for the broader movement toward intercultural cooperation that their work represented. What we have built here is just the beginning, Dancing Moon replied during the ceremony that followed the dinner. Our children and their children will continue expanding these approaches, creating new forms of cooperation that we cannot yet imagine. Chief Joseph nodded gravely. And when historians look back on this time, they will see that the real conquest of the American West was not military victory, but the victory of those who chose understanding over hatred, cooperation over conflict. The following year brought recognition that surprised even Will and Dancing Moon with its scope and significance. President William McKinley, acting on recommendations from federal health officials who had observed their work, appointed them to a national commission tasked with developing policies for medical care in diverse communities throughout the expanding United States. Your integrated approach to frontier medicine has demonstrated benefits that extend far beyond the Southwest, the president wrote in his letter of appointment. The commission's work will help ensure that similar approaches can be adapted to serve immigrant communities in eastern cities, diverse populations in western territories, and Native American communities throughout the nation. The appointment required them to spend significant time in Washington, working with federal officials, medical experts, and community representatives to develop policies that could be implemented on a national scale. But it also gave them unprecedented influence over the direction of American healthcare policy. Their final report, submitted in 1902, recommended establishing integrated medical facilities in every community with significant cultural diversity, funding traditional healers to work alongside conventionally trained physicians, and creating medical school curricula that required cultural competence training for all graduates. Medicine cannot be effective if it ignores the cultural contexts in which healing takes place, their report concluded. The future of American healthcare requires practitioners who can work effectively with the diverse populations that characterize our growing nation. Many of their recommendations were implemented over the following decade, creating a framework for intercultural medicine that would influence American healthcare policy well into the 20th century. But for Will and Dancing Moon personally, their greatest satisfaction came from seeing their own relationship mature into something that had transcended the racial and cultural boundaries that once seemed impossible to cross. Their marriage had become not just a personal success but a symbol of what was possible when people chose love and cooperation over fear and division. As they entered their 50s, still working together at their original clinic but now training others to carry forward their innovative approaches, they could look back on careers that had transformed not just medical practice, but intercultural relations throughout the American West. "When I found you treating patients in that Apache camp," Will said during one of their evening conversations, "I thought I was just meeting a skilled healer who could help me save lives during a smallpox epidemic. And when I agreed to work with a white doctor," Dancing Moon replied, "I thought I was making a temporary alliance to help my people survive a crisis." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the New Mexico landscape where they had built their life together, surrounded by the gardens where plants from both their cultures grew side by side. "We built something that will outlast us," Will observed. "We built something that will grow and change and adapt to serve future generations," Dancing Moon agreed. "Our children will take these approaches to places we never imagined, serving communities we never knew existed." As the first stars appeared in the clear desert sky, Will and Dancing Moon Carter reflected on a partnership that had begun with desperate necessity and evolved into a love story that changed the course of American medicine and intercultural relations. Their legacy would live on in the hundreds of practitioners they had trained, the thousands of patients they had served, and the model of cooperation they had created for future generations who would face their own challenges in building bridges between different peoples and cultures. The Apache medicine woman and the cowboy doctor had proven that love could indeed conquer the barriers that divided people, and that healing could extend far beyond medicine to encompass the relationships between communities that had once seen each other as enemies. The end.